Ever wonder why the same people who tried to set you up are now desperately searching for you in your hometown? They thought they could keep you down, but here you are, beyond their reach, gone like a whisper in the wind. They underestimated your growth. They thought you'd stay trapped in the same cycle, but you rose, higher and higher, lifted by God's hand to a place they cannot even imagine, and now they are lost, confused, while you are far beyond their reach. There was a time when they thought they had you. They schemed, gossiped, tried to drag you into their petty drama, expecting you to be the same person you were before. They thought they knew you. They knew the old version of you, the one who was still growing, still figuring things out, still searching for your purpose. But they didn't realize that while they were busy conspiring behind your back, you were evolving. They didn't see the nights you spent in prayer, the time you devoted to your own healing, or the way you began to see through their games. They thought you were still caught in the same traps they set long ago, but you had been silently unshackling yourself from all of it. The setup was clever. They planted seeds of doubt, envy, and drama, hoping you would take the bait. They tried to lure you into arguments that had no resolution, into battles that didn't serve your soul. They wanted you to fight over scraps when you were destined for a feast. Their words were laced with poison, but you didn't drink it. Instead, you watched, you listened, you learned. They wanted to pull you back into a cycle of chaos, to make you lose yourself in the noise and confusion. They expected you to react the way you always did, to defend yourself, to engage with their nonsense, to be dragged down to their level. But this time you stayed silent. They couldn't understand it. Your silence wasn't weakness, it was power. It was you stepping back, rising above and seeing the truth for what it was. You see, the real setup was not their plan against you. It was God's plan for you. While they were busy plotting, God was busy elevating. He was removing the scales from your eyes so you could see the smallness of their games. He was showing you that their hatred, their envy, and their drama had nothing to do with you and everything to do with their own spiritual poverty. They were trying to keep you at a level you had already outgrown. They thought they were clever, but what they didn't realize is that every attempt to bring you down was only pushing you further into your purpose. Every betrayal was a step closer to your breakthrough. Every attack only revealed more of the divine protection around you. And while they were busy scheming, you were busy transforming. Their setup was always destined to fail. Why? Because they were operating on a level where lies and deception thrive, but you were operating in truth, and truth is undefeated. Every plan they made against you only exposed the cracks in their own character. Every trap they set only revealed the depths of their own insecurities. They couldn't pull you down because you'd already risen above their reach. They were playing a game you no longer participated in, and their attempts to drag you back into that game became more and more desperate as they realized you were already gone. And then God went to work. Slowly he began to transform you, molding you into something more. Day by day, moment by moment, you grew, evolving into the person you were always destined to be. This wasn't an overnight transformation. The elevation you experienced was slow, deliberate, and guided by something greater than yourself. It began with little whispers in your spirit. You started to feel a pull away from the things that no longer served you. The people, the places, the habits that once seemed so familiar suddenly felt foreign, out of place, like clothes that didn't fit anymore. You couldn't explain it at first, but deep down you knew. Something inside you was changing. You began to move differently. The things that once triggered you no longer had the same effect. You stopped reacting out of impulse and started responding from a place of peace. You weren't the same person who would get caught up in petty arguments. You weren't the same person who needed to prove anything to anyone. God was working on your spirit, elevating you out of the noise and into His presence. As God worked on you, the elevation wasn't just spiritual, it was mental and emotional as well. You began to see yourself differently. You started to understand that your worth wasn't determined by how others saw you, but by how God saw you. Your self-worth was no longer tied to external validation. You didn't need anyone's approval because you had already been approved by the Most High. That realization alone shifted your entire world. And the more you elevated, the more you noticed how God began to confuse your enemies. They were expecting you to stay the same, to remain trapped in their drama, to respond to their provocations. But God had hidden you. He had cloaked your spirit in peace, so that while they were fighting with themselves, you were being lifted to new heights. They couldn't touch you because they couldn't find you. Not spiritually, not emotionally, not mentally. You moved differently, walked differently, thought differently. The elevation took you places you never imagined. And what was so incredible about it was that God didn't just lift you up. He did it in such a way that your enemies couldn't even comprehend what had happened. They were left scratching their heads, wondering how you had slipped through their fingers, how you had grown beyond their reach. As you elevated, the transformation wasn't always visible to the outside world. You weren't posting about it. You weren't broadcasting every step. Instead, you were moving in silence, letting God handle the work behind the scenes. He was elevating you not just spiritually, but holistically, preparing your mind, your heart, and even your physical environment for the next level. You became a witness to your own growth, and it felt like a rebirth, as if the old version of you had been shed like a snake's skin, leaving behind only wisdom and strength. Now they're searching for you. They look all over your hometown, asking where you are, wondering how you slipped away. They never expected you to grow beyond their reach. They go back to the places you used to be. They drive past your old house, asking neighbors if they've seen you. They talk to people who knew you back when you were still part of their world, still playing the game they tried to trap you in. But no one can give them the answers they're looking for. No one knows where you've gone because you've outgrown all of it. They look for you in old haunts, thinking you might return to the familiar places. They ask about you at gatherings, family events, trying to figure out how someone who was once so intertwined with their lives could have disappeared so completely. But what they don't understand is that you're not hiding. You've simply moved on to a different plane, a different reality. They're searching for the old you, not realizing that the person they knew no longer exists. Even your family is confused. They're used to you being around, used to you playing the role that was assigned to you in the family dynamic. But now, even they can't explain where you've gone. People ask about you, but no one can quite articulate the shift that has taken place. The person they once knew is a distant memory, and the person you've become is beyond their comprehension. They search for you in the physical, but they can't find you because your elevation wasn't just physical, it was spiritual. You've outgrown the space that once contained you. You've outgrown the people who once surrounded you. You've outgrown the small-mindedness, the limitations, the petty drama that once held you down. They're looking for someone who no longer exists in their reality. And the more they search, the more they realize that they will never find you. You've transcended their reach, and there's nothing they can do to pull you back. You've moved into a new chapter, and they're still stuck in the old one, flipping through pages, trying to find where you went. But you've left the book behind. You're writing a new story now, one they'll never be a part of. What's most ironic is that as they search for you, they're searching for a version of you that no longer exists. They ask around, look through old photos, recall memories of who you used to be. But it's all an illusion now. The version of you they're trying to find has been replaced by someone who operates on a frequency far beyond their comprehension. It's as if they're looking through a rear-view mirror, chasing shadows of the past, while you are light years ahead, living in a reality they can't even fathom. And the more they search, the more they realize how much they underestimated you. Their confusion grows with each passing day, as they struggle to understand how someone who was once so familiar to them could become so distant, so untouchable. They might even feel regret creeping in, realizing they had the opportunity to grow alongside you, but chose instead to remain stagnant. Now, as they wander through the remnants of your past, they're left with nothing but the echoes of who you used to be, while you've moved on to bigger, better things. Your hometown was never meant to contain you. It was too small, too limited for the magnitude of your potential. From the very beginning, there was something about your hometown that felt constricting. Maybe it was the energy, the people, or the mentality that surrounded you. It wasn't that the place was inherently bad, It just wasn't enough for who you were destined to be. You didn't realize it at first, but as you grew, you began to feel the walls closing in. The places that once felt familiar began to feel suffocating. The people who once seemed like friends began to show their true colors. You tried to make it work. You tried to fit into the mold that everyone expected you to fit into. But no matter how hard you tried, something inside you knew that you were made for more. The dreams you had, the aspirations you held, were too big for the small-town mindset that surrounded you. And so you began to feel like a stranger in your own home, like a bird trapped in a cage too small for its wings. It was around certain ages, maybe 23, 28, or 30, that you started to see the limitations clearly. You looked around and realized that the people around you weren't growing. They were content with where they were, content with the same routines, the same conversations, the same cycles of drama and negativity. But you couldn't be content. You were restless, hungry for something more, something greater. That restlessness was your soul calling you to break free. It was God whispering to you that there was more out there for you, but you had to be willing to leave behind the familiar to reach it. And so, you did. You stopped trying to fit in, stopped trying to make yourself smaller to accommodate the people and places around you. You spread your wings and flew. Breaking free wasn't easy. It meant leaving behind the safety net of familiarity. It meant stepping into the unknown, trusting that God would guide your steps, even when the path wasn't clear. But you knew that staying in your hometown would have stifled your growth. It would have kept you in a place of mediocrity when you were destined for greatness. Now, as you look back, you realize that breaking free was the best decision you ever made. While the people in your hometown stayed stagnant, you soared. While they stayed caught in the same cycles, you moved on to bigger and better things. And now, you look back with gratitude, not because you miss it, but because it showed you what you didn't want to become. And the most liberating part of breaking free was realizing that your growth was never meant to fit within the confines of a single place. The lessons you learned, the wisdom you gained, and the strength you developed were far too expansive for any hometown to contain. You had to step outside of what was known, step into the unknown, to truly spread your wings. In doing so, you opened yourself up to new opportunities, new energies, and new heights of spiritual awareness that your past environment could never have offered you. They underestimated your greatness. They couldn't see the royalty within you, the man or woman of God you were becoming. They thought they knew you, but what they saw was only a shadow of the real you. They judged you based on your past, based on the limitations they imposed on you. But they couldn't see the divine greatness that was planted inside you, waiting to bloom. They couldn't see the royal lineage you were a part of, the spiritual inheritance that was yours to claim. You weren't just anyone. You were a child of God, destined for greatness. But because they couldn't see it, they dismissed you. They underestimated your potential, thinking you were just like them, stuck, lost, limited. They didn't realize that you were being prepared for something greater, that every trial, every setback, was only a stepping stone toward your destiny. Their inability to see your greatness didn't stop you from rising. In fact, it fueled you. You knew that their opinions, their judgments, had no bearing on your future. Your worth wasn't defined by their words, it was defined by God's plan for you. And as you began to walk in that plan, your true power began to shine through. They couldn't stand it. They couldn't stand the way you carried yourself with a quiet confidence, the way you didn't need their approval to validate your existence. Your light was too bright for them, your strength too intimidating. They tried to dim it, tried to make you doubt yourself, but their efforts were in vain. You had already stepped into your royal status. You began to realize that the battles they wanted you to fight were beneath you. Their drama, their petty fights, their negativity, it was all beneath the level you were operating on. You didn't need to engage with them because you had already ascended to a higher plane, and that's what they couldn't stand. The fact that you had outgrown their nonsense, that you had become someone they could no longer control. You are royalty, vibrating at a frequency they couldn't reach. You are aligned with your divine purpose, walking in your calling. And no matter how much they try to pull you back, You will never return to the level they expect you to be at. You've stepped into your greatness and now there's no going back. They had their chance to see your greatness, but their own limitations blinded them. They saw you through the lens of their own insecurities, judging you based on the smallness of their own minds. They didn't understand that what they were seeing was only the beginning, a seed that had yet to bloom into its full potential. You were already destined for greatness, but they were too busy trying to diminish you to notice the divine favor resting on your life. It's no wonder they couldn't handle your light. Their darkness was too consuming for them to ever recognize it. But now that you've fully stepped into your greatness, the tables have turned. The very people who underestimated you are now realizing just how wrong they were. They see you shining, and it burns them. They see the confidence in your stride, the purpose in your steps, and they can't stand it. But their opinions no longer matter. What once might have hurt you rolls off your back now because you understand that their opinions never had any power over your destiny. You are royalty, not by birthright, but by spiritual inheritance, and no one can take that away from you. Like Lot's wife, you knew that looking back would only curse your future. You left behind the toxic environment because God had a bigger plan for you. There came a point when you realized that looking back wasn't an option. You saw the destruction behind you, the broken relationships, the toxic cycles, the people who were content with their misery. And you knew that if you turned around, if you allowed yourself to be pulled back into that world, it would destroy everything you had worked so hard to build. Like Lot's wife, the temptation to look back was strong. It's always easier to return to what's familiar, even if it's harmful. But you knew that your future depended on your ability to move forward. You knew that God had a bigger plan for you, one that required you to let go of the past and trust in His guidance. And so, you made the decision to keep moving. Every step forward was a step into the unknown, but with each step, you grew stronger. You began to trust yourself, trust the process, and trust that God was leading you exactly where you needed to be. You didn't have all the answers, but you had faith, and that faith carried you through. The people you left behind didn't understand your decision. They thought you were abandoning them, that you were turning your back on everything you had once known. But what they didn't understand was that you weren't abandoning them. You were saving yourself. You were choosing life over death, growth over stagnation, faith over fear. Looking back would have cursed your future. It would have chained you to the very things that were holding you down. But by choosing to move forward, you broke those chains. You stepped into a new chapter, one where your potential was limitless, where your purpose was clear, and where your future was bright. You've come too far to turn back now. The past is behind you, and the future is waiting. And as you move forward, you carry with you the lessons you've learned, the strength you've gained, and the unshakable faith that God's plan for you is greater than anything you could have imagined. Moving forward wasn't just a choice. It was a necessity for your survival, for your soul's peace. There were moments when you were tempted to look back, to return to old habits, old relationships, old comforts. But you knew that those things were no longer aligned with where you were headed. Looking back would have been the easy choice, but it would have cost you everything. So you chose the hard road, the narrow path, trusting that God's plan was far better than anything you could imagine. And with each step, the road became clearer, the light brighter. Your faith became your anchor. When the road ahead seemed uncertain, you didn't waver because you knew God had already paved the way for you. Every step forward felt like a shedding of the past, a release of the old energy that had once weighed you down. And with every release you felt lighter, freer, more connected to the divine. You've moved into a space where peace reigns and drama cannot survive. You're walking in alignment with your purpose now, and the beauty of it is that there's no more room for the toxic influences that once plagued your journey. You're moving forward, and nothing will hold you back. Choosing faith over drama was the best decision you made. You've grown, you've shifted, and now you're shining brighter than ever. So embrace your growth. Leave behind anything or anyone holding you back. Don't look back. Move forward in faith and trust in God's plan for you.